Hello, 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 and welcome to Nursing News You Can Use. Add 5. I'm Tina Baxter, your host, and I want to thank you for tuning in. For those of you that are on our Nurse Shark Academy page, and those that are on our Baxter Professional Services page, or those that are watching us on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. We're going to start with our affirmation for today. I now release the old and open my heart to new opportunities. I now release the old and open my heart to new opportunities. That's our affirmation for the Louise Hay calendar for 2024. And I have to say, that is one of the topics that is going to be for my upcoming blog, is about the power of new beginnings. And so I encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to sign up for our newsletter, sign up for the Nurse Shark Academy newsletter. Because I'm excited about what we're going to be doing in this last 4 months of the year and looking forward to new opportunities. I'm going to take a sip and let's get on with the news because there's a lot to cover today. All right, so here's our first story. This is coming from WUNC. This says this was the year advanced practice nurses thought they'd get full practice authority in North Carolina. They were wrong. Every so often, Megan Connor, a nurse anesthetist in Greenville, says she sees a patient who's driven for hours to come for a screening colonoscopy, but who instead has to be sent to the emergency department. I'm looking at their blood pressure on the monitor, and it's super high, like 200 over something, Connor said. She asked her usual questions. Have they had high blood pressure before? No. High cholesterol? No. Ever had a heart attack? No. Do they see a doctor regularly? No. It frustrates Connor that so many patients who have traveled sometimes hours for care in eastern North Carolina end up not getting it because of common ailments they can't get treated closer to home. That's why Connor is a big believer in the Safe, Accessible, Value-Directed, and Excellent Healthcare Act, or the SAVE Act, which would give advanced practice registered nurses like her full practice authority. She argues the data show that more nurse practitioners would provide primary care in rural North Carolina if the state would give them autonomy to practice, bringing care to small burgs that often go without. And now the demands for care are being driven by hundreds of thousands of patients newly eligible for care because of Medicaid expansion. Along with the growing number of lawmakers who believe the legislation is overdue, advanced practice nurses thought this would be a great year that the SAVE Act finally passed. They were wrong. Bills like the SAVE Act to broaden APRN scope of practice are not new. In fact, efforts go back decades. The SAVE Act was filed early in the legislative biennium that started in February of 2023 in both the North Carolina House of Representatives as House Bill 218 and then the State Senate, Senate Bill 175, and the number of co-sponsors between the two chambers quickly grew to 79 lawmakers. That's pretty awesome. Senator Joyce Kwawick, I'm sorry, I probably butchered your name, and I do apologize. I don't know if they've ever had any bill that had that many co-sponsors. That's what I was trying to say. That's pretty impressive. Although neither bill went far, the idea resonated throughout the legislative process. Language from the SAVE Act made an appearance in a version of the 2023 Senate budget that passed in the chamber and was part of negotiations with the House. In the end, SAVE Act language was carved out of the final budget. At the beginning of 2024 session, SAVE Act champions were encouraged when the bill's language was rolled into a different bill, House Bill 681, which would streamline the process of out-of-state physicians to get licensure in North Carolina. When the Senate Health Committee met in May to discuss House Bill 681, it took about 5 minutes to discuss the part about medical licensure. The second part, with the SAVE Act language, was new, and questions about it took up the rest of the hour. One new addition was that the bill proposed a limit on how many surgeries an anesthesiologist could supervise. Currently, anesthesiologists can monitor up to 4 surgeries at a time that a certified registered nurse anesthetist is administering. At the same time, the revised bill gave full practice authority to nurse practitioners. The committee met again the following week to vote on House Bill 681. Again, the committee found new language in the bill that would have cost anesthesiologists money by setting tighter standards on how they function. So here's what's happening. So basically they stopped this bill because the anesthesiologist up to this point can just supervise how many ever surgeries that they want at the same time. Now the bill wants to limit it to only 4 at the same time. Therefore, if they're not attending or supervising these surgeries, that means that decreases their ability to bill. Okay? Follow me here? All right. So, Senator Jim Burgeon, Republican from Angier, the proponent of the amended House Bill 681, said the point of the new language was to alert lawmakers to a possible violation of federal law. He also asserted anesthesiologists have not come to the table about the SAVE Act, a bill many anesthesiologist groups oppose. They think that they don't have to come to talk to us and that they can stop any legislation that affects them. And I think that it's finally starting to dawn on people that the anesthesiologists have not been doing what they've been telling everybody they're doing. House Bill 681 finally passed through the Senate Health Care Committee with no votes, even as some senators raised concerns about rushing the bill through to the Senate floor. Right before the vote, Senator Mike Woodward, a Democrat from Durham, said the SAVE Act never gets enough discussion because it's always introduced in a short session. It was the first time that we had discussed a lot of these issues. It would be one thing. But 6 years of talking about things, if this was a business, it would not be very successful because the decisions are hard to get made. Kimberly Gordon, a nurse anesthetist and government relations director at the North Carolina Association of Nurse Anesthetists, said she can understand why lawmakers would not want to chew on a complex bill like the SAVE Act in a short session. That was especially understandable this year with the budget debate centering on private school vouchers, teacher pay, medical cannabis, and even the size of the budget. A legislative leader on the SAVE Act agreed unsuccessful budget negotiations sapped the energy needed to address several important bills, said Senator Gail Addock, a Democrat from Cary, a nurse practitioner with decades of experience. Well, that's great that they have a nurse practitioner serving, so I'm kind of happy about that because then they would know some of the ins and outs of the questions and be able to speak intelligently about the questions that people would pose. So I think that's great. She's been introducing the bill since 2015 and slowly building support for it. So I'm going to say, if you want to read more about this story, because this is a very long story, check it out. But sorry to them, but hopefully next time, and maybe they can get the bill passed. All right, let's move on to our next story. We have Andrew Cuomo in the news talking about the COVID-19 nursing home policy. So he's going to testify before the House COVID panel on the policy. So here we go. So former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat, will testify in a September 10th hearing before the House Oversight and Accountability Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. Panel chair Brad Winstrup, represent a Republican from Ohio. Excuse me. The hearing is set to focus on the guidance Cuomo issued in the early days of the pandemic that led to New York nursing homes and long-term care facilities admitting patients who had tested positive for COVID-19. Andrew Cuomo owes answers to the 15,000 families who lost loved ones in New York's nursing homes during the COVID-19 pandemic. On September 10th, Americans will have Cuomo appear before the closed-door testimony before the panel earlier this year and receiving a subpoena, so they'll have a chance to get answers. Winstrup charged that in the interview, Cuomo was shockingly callous when pressed to explain discrepancies in nursing home death counts, repeatedly deflected responsibility for the nursing home directive, and most egregiously showed little remorse for the thousands of lives lost. Cuomo's appearance on the September 10th hearing is voluntary. So we'll see what happens. There more information comes out. Again, there's more to this story, but there's so much to cover today. So keep an eye out on what happens next week in these hearings. All right. So let's go to Florida. This is an article that came across my desk, and I wanted to share it with you. And it says, disabled people in Florida struggling to get Medicaid restored after unwinding. So as similar issues things have happened with Medicaid changing some of the rules here in Indiana, I'm keeping an eye on what's happening because anything that affects patient care, insurance, and things like that ultimately affects us as healthcare workers. Okay, So here we have it. So Lauren Eakin is legally blind and confined to a wheelchair with cerebral palsy. For years, Eakin lived on her in her own apartment with the help of caregivers who assist her with nearly everything. This summer, she lost most of her relative independence when the state of Florida revoked her essential Medicaid coverage. She says, I need help for the rest of my life, getting up, to eating, to preparing meals, to going out in the community. I need help, I would say, almost 24/7. Eakin's care team, paid for through Medicaid, also helps her live a relatively normal life, including trips for her advocacy work in the community and to play on a local baseball team. Eakin's Medicaid coverage lapsed in June, a loss she discovered only when payment to her caregivers stopped. As a result, they substantially reduced their hours. That means Eakin was alone overnight for over a month, unable to get out of bed to use the bathroom or leave the apartment in case of an emergency. It was pure panic because I'm like, what the heck happened? Eakin said. During the pandemic, states were required to keep providing healthcare coverage to Medicaid recipients, even if they had lost their eligibility. When the COVID public health emergency ended, eligibility rules for the program were reinstated last year. The nationwide reevaluation of eligibility for enrollees in Medicaid, the government-backed health insurance program for people with low incomes or disabilities, went terribly wrong in states like Florida. More than 25 million in the U.S. have lost coverage during what has been called the unwinding of Medicaid, according to the health policy nonprofit KFF. Roughly 70% of those who were dropped lost their coverage because of procedural reasons such as paperwork issues, although some may no longer qualify for other reasons such as an increase in income. Melissa Mazeda, Vice President of Care Coordination at J&M Support Coordination in Florida, said procedural mishaps have been particularly problematic for people with developmental disabilities who often require extra assistance to complete the renewal process. Advocates for the disabled say far too many were lumped into the wrong Medicaid categories, were dropped with little notice, and didn't receive timely help when they were disenrolled. Mazeda said states should never have kicked the developmentally disabled off Medicaid in the first place. Well, yeah, that makes sense. It's not like they're suddenly going to be able to, recover or get smarter. And I'm not saying they're not smart, but you know what I mean. Their IQ's not going to go up. They're not going to be able to take care of themselves overnight. And this is an issue that we've had here in Indiana. And I know that because I see it every day. I talk to my patients, and if they make $10 more than they're supposed to, they get kicked off. So she says they are never not going to need Medicaid. You don't get over Down syndrome. There is no cure for cerebral palsy. You don't get better from spina bifida or autism. They're going to require lifelong services, and the basis of that is Medicaid. And that is common sense, but sometimes, as we like to say, common sense isn't common. The National Health Law Program, a nonprofit that advocates for the health rights of low-income and underserved individuals, have filed civil rights complaints in Colorado, Texas, and Washington, D.C., alleging discrimination against people with disabilities. In Florida, a class action lawsuit accuses the state of unwinding process of being not just sloppy, but illegal. Plaintiffs allege the state violated the constitutional rights of tens of thousands of Floridians, ending coverage without adequate notice and with little or no explanation of the actual reason. Of the 1.9 million people in Florida who lost Medicaid coverage, according to KFF, patient advocates estimate that thousands of disabled people like Eakin have been affected. In her case, the state sent several digital notices asking for additional information, but she wasn't able to read them because she's legally blind. Yeah, it's stupid stuff like that. Yeah. The notices were not sent to her care coordinators, who could have helped her with the paperwork before it was too late, according to her care team. Their process is really bad for individuals who have visual impairments and who are disabled, especially if you don't have computer skills and that's the only way you're being notified. And that is a problem. And that is a problem that I've seen. I love technology. I use it every day, but we have to make it accessible. And that's part of the issue. I have patients that don't even have the internet. So how are they going to get these notices? So that's a big issue. And Dunedin, maybe it's Dunedin, Florida, Paul, who is 57 and has an intellectual disability, a pacemaker, and a seizure disorder, says his Medicaid coverage was dropped in March. Paul asked that his last name be withheld for fear of retribution from state officials. And that's really sad. The only communication he received from the state, a Medicaid renewal notice last November that stated he was approved for a year, according to Paul and his care team. All payments for his care in a group home and staff for day activities were cut off until his coverage was reinstated at the end of August. No explanation was provided by the state during the lapse, Paul said. At one point, the stress became so severe, Paul was taken to the emergency room for a panic attack. That was the worst thing I ever had, Paul said. I worried I would lose everybody, everything. NBC News, which is reporting the story, repeatedly requested comment from officials with the Department of Children and Families, which verifies Medicaid eligibility in Florida, and from Reverend Ron DeSantis' office. At an August 21st news conference, DeSantis was asked by NBC News why so many Floridians who should still be on Medicaid were losing coverage during the unwinding. He says, I'm not sure that's true. The Secretary of State, Department of Children and Families, Siobhan Harris, then stepped in saying, that's not factual. We're committed to ensuring that anyone who is eligible maintains coverage, she added. But the disenrollments, as Zeta said, have been unprecedented and are ongoing. So if you're in Florida, please pay attention to this, and also across the country, because what happens in one state often happens in another. All right, let's get into our next story. All right. Let's talk about the University of Arizona. Now, this story was mentioned to me yesterday. I happened to be in a meeting, and we were talking about another story that I will update you on later that we did cover. And she said, "Oh, you know who else has trouble? University of Arizona." And why we're talking about this is because it affects all departments across the university. So I want you to know about this. This is from the AZ Luminera, and it says everything you need to know about UA's financial crisis, a 2024 recap and update. This was published on March 11th of 2024. And this is one of the most update stories that I was able to find. Okay. So the University of Arizona is in the midst of a financial overhaul as UA officials and the Arizona board regents scramble to rein in over spending that went under the radar for years. So on November 2nd, Lisa Rolney, then the UA's chief financial officer, presented a shocking update to the Board of Regents, revealing that the school had a significant deficit in their cash reserves. She exposed that school units, particularly the administration and athletics departments, have been overspending heavily with minimal oversight or knowledge. The aftermath of Rooney's announcement has been a whirlwind of changes and revelations that the Arizona Luminera last summarized in December. Since then, numbers and budgets have shifted, and the university's new CFO, John Arnold, is remodeling the school's operational infrastructure. So this came up because we were talking about how in the other story, the entire nursing faculty quit, and we'll get into that later. And so this person who has knowledge of this, whose name I will not call for confidentiality reasons, but she did tell me about some of this, what's going on. And so I thought I'd share it with you because we need to think about what's happening in some of our universities, because it's not just happening in hospitals and things like that. When this affects the entire university, it also affects nursing faculty. So I want to bring this up. So it says faculty, staff, students, community members, and now Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs are among the critics denouncing UA presidents Robert Robbins, school administrators, and the Board of Regents for their poor leadership and response to the financial crisis. The ensuing calls for accountability and reform have resulted in various leadership and personnel changes to both the UA and Board of Regents. Here, Arizona Luminera has compiled a quick breakdown of some of these developments. And the UA also now has a financial update page with more extensive details. So please go ahead and take a look at that and see if that's still available. So after the issues became public, with Roney's presentation on November 2nd, a special Board of Regents meeting to discuss university governance and operations, she revealed the school's projected days cash on hand, a metric for liquidity, or total of unrestricted cash immediately available for the school, was far lower than the Board of Regents requirements. The university had overspent by 140 million and only had 122 days cash on hand, which was 30 less than the minimum requirement of 140. Roney's original projection for fiscal year 2024 days cash on hand was 97, but new projections are even lower. Initially, following Roney's announcement, Robbins gave a limited glimpse into the factors that led to the UA financial situation, including athletics department loans and strategic initiative spending. Since then, Arnold has taken over as UA CFO and is working along Robbins to understand, mitigate, and repair the university's financial problems. So here are some of the reports that they had Arnold reported in some of the meetings. The school's budgeting practices, as well as decentralization of budgets and operations without sufficient reporting and oversight measures, allowed overspending to go under the radar. Lack of reporting is really what hid the overall spending problems. The university's tuition discounting attracted more students who paid less tuition and required more staff to support the school's growing student body. The revenue didn't come with the students that we needed. So that was the other issue. Then we have pandemic funding lowered operational costs in 2021, artificially inflating the year's days cash on hand number so that when that metric took a steep dive in 2022, he and the Board of Regents assumed it was noise in the system due to COVID and UA administrators' substantial investments in strategic initiatives. And in 2023, 27 payrolls versus the normal 26, and that inflation-related increases have made personnel and operations more expensive. So all of these things seem to have come up. So that kind of gets you an idea of what's happening there. And again, the reason why I bring this up is because it did affect other departments. So because they now face a projected 177 million annual shortfall and a 70 days cash on hand for the end of year fiscal year 2024, that's according to the February 9th financial oversight report. 116 million, or 2/3 of the deficit, comes from departments that are over budget. The report says 61 of the 81, or 75%, reporting units in a budget deficit. That's a 90% increase from the 61 million from last year. The athletic department alone makes up 32 million. Strategic planning expenses and unallocated leases, utilities, institutional costs make up 27 million. The University of Arizona Global Campus makes up the remaining 2 million. So those are some of the things that are going into it. If you're really interested in this, there's more in this report, and I encourage you to read through the whole thing. There's a lot in this, and I don't have time to unpack it, but I'm bringing it to your attention so that if you are in this area or you're interested in what's happening in academia in particular, take a look at that. Okay, so this story, we're going to go to this story, then we're going to take a break because I think we're going to need a break after this one. All right. This is coming out of CBS Miami, and it says family seeks answers after claiming loved one's body found in nursing home closet. So let's get into it. A South Florida family is seeking answers after claiming the body of their loved one was found decomposing in a closet at a Miami-Dade nursing home. On Tuesday afternoon, Rivla Brewis told CBS News Miami that family members and friends plan to keep pressing for answers and would gather again Tuesday night by the North Dade Nursing and Rehabilitation Center. We want to know what the cause of death was and why he died in a closet, and if he died in a closet, and why no one was looking in those areas, and why the closet was untouched for 2 weeks. This troubles us because he died inhumanely, and there's also the question of him decomposing within that closet in the past 2 weeks and putting other residents at risk. Our questions are not being answered because staff will not speak to us. We are receiving no explanation for what happened here. Staff members are not answering questions. We heard that the coroner could not positively identify him yet because his body is decomposing and they want to check dental records, but we are certain it is him. We need to get answers about what happened to Ellen. This is very upsetting to all of us. On Tuesday, North Miami Police Chief Sharice Goss told CBS News Miami that there is an ongoing investigation and that there will be an update when identification is made. North Miami Police Major Kessler Brooks told CBS News Miami that it's too early to say if there was any foul play. When CBS News Miami contacted the center for comment on Tuesday, a person who answered the phone hung up. On Monday night, family and friends gathered outside North Day Nursing and Rehabilitation Center calling for justice. The family said the body of Elin Etienne, 71, was found in the closet at the facility less than 3 weeks after he arrived there for rehab. Etienne's niece, Rively Bruce, said, now he was there for rehab, planning on going home, right? Was planning on being there for rehab, and that means he was planning on going home. So what happened? So this is a very unusual case. Very unusual case. And I'm like, how is somebody going to be missing for almost 3 weeks, and he's in somebody's closet in the nursing home? That big red flags. So anyway, big red flags. It says more than a dozen people huddled across the street from the facility Monday evening chanting Justin for Elin Etienne. Bruce said her uncle was a loving man who migrated from Haiti more than 30 years ago. Etienne became a chef, then provided support for relatives to find the American dream in South Florida too. Things changed last fall. Etienne suffered 2 strokes, according to the family. He then developed dementia. He also suffered an aneurysm that stole his mobility and much of his cognitive functions. Loved ones sent Etienne, who has a daughter and grandchild, to the nursing center hoping staff could help him recover. Family members felt comfortable with the staff. Bruce last saw her uncle on August the 20th. She brought him flowers, balloons, and a new pair of shoes because he often gave loved ones gifts when they were in need. 2 days later, though, a nurse from the center called. They kept on saying he signed himself out and he didn't want anything to do with his family. That's impossible because he has dementia. And that's what I'm saying. How are you going to sign himself out? You don't let somebody who has dementia sign himself out. Okay? So that's another big red flag. CBS News Miami approached the nursing center staff for a response. A staff member said no comment and then shut the front doors. North Miami Police did not return a call or emails. The agency did consider Etienne missing and on a flyer asked the public for help last month. Etienne's loved one hoped for the best until the phones rang Monday morning. The family said they received an anonymous call saying that Etienne's body was found decomposing in a closet. However, a relative said the nursing center staff did not communicate with Etienne's family, who are demanding an explanation, mainly because he decomposed and died alone in their suffering. It just doesn't make sense. So there's more information comes out about this case. Definitely want to keep an eye on that. That is just horrific. And yeah, let's take a break on that one. Staffing, stagnant wages, no work-life balance. Stop being eaten alive. Find your joy, strength, and happiness. Become the leader you are always meant to be. Nurse entrepreneurs are using their skills to launch successful businesses every day. Make your dreams come true. Join the Nurse Shark Academy and come feel the sun at the nursesharkacademy.biz. All right, here's our next story. This was, I saw this last night, either last night or this morning. It happened to be on my news feed, and then it was sent to me again. So I wanted to share this with you. And okay, let's just talk about it. This one, Wide Open Country. I can't believe it. My husband can believe it, but we'll talk about it. Okay, it says, Florida doctor accidentally removes wrong organ from patient, causing immediate death. William Bryan was a 70-year-old man from Alabama who suddenly began suffering from left lower abdominal pain. Per USA Today, Bryan went to Ascension Sacred Heart Emerald Coast Hospital in Florida for a splenectomy as it was discovered he had an enlarged spleen. The Bryant's family attorney, Joe Zarzua, said that Dr. Thomas Shaknovsky persuaded Brian and his wife Beverly to have the procedure done there instead of Alabama, their home state. The law firm representing Brian's family said the couple was warned by Shaknovsky that Brian could experience serious complications if he left the hospital. However, in the middle of the procedure, Shaknovsky removed Brian's liver by accident. Per the Pensacola News Journal, Shaknovsky removed Brian's liver, and in doing so, transected the major vasculature supplying the liver, causing immediate and catastrophic blood loss that resulted in Bill Bryant's death. Wow. Their attorney says, I have the pleasure of representing Mrs. Bryant and her family. Unfortunately, we represent her in one of the most egregious cases of medical malpractice that I've ever been involved with. The doctors kept suggesting that it was too dangerous to move him, that the spleen could rupture, and that they needed to go forward with the procedure. According to Zarzua, an autopsy was performed on Brian. The medical examiner determined that Brian's liver was gone and his spleen was still present with a small cyst attached. The spleen had a small cyst on it that had some hemorrhage around it, but it was not a fatal issue. It was a fairly routine-looking cyst. It probably would have been very treatable. Beverly Bryant spoke out in defense of her husband. She believes negligence played a major part in her husband's death. They took him from us while he was completely helpless on the operating table. He was the best husband and father that I could have possibly asked for. I'll get through this, and I'm going to be strong for him because he deserves justice for this. As of now, the Bryant family intends to file a lawsuit. A criminal investigation is also ongoing. And again, all right, I don't have all the facts of the case, but from the reporting, yeah, this was a major screw up, to say the least. And I am not surprised now that they're looking at criminal charges, because it sounded like there's a major cover up after this, too. And it looks like there might have been some fraudulent, and again, allegedly, some fraudulent statements made to get them to stay there to have the surgery. I don't know. So we'll see. All right, but let's get on to, let's talk about Dickinson State, because that's the other university that I was talking about. I'm just going to brief follow up with Dickinson State and what their plans are for their nursing program. As a brief recap, their entire nursing faculty quit. They almost lost their accreditation, and a lot of stuff's been going on. The president did step down. So let's see what it's updated. This was updated as of yesterday. So the Dickinson State University nursing program has undergone some changes over the summer. DSU nurse administrator Dr. Carrie Hogan said the program is working with the North Dakota Board of Nursing to ensure program accreditation, as well as continuing to find additional nurse educators and meet teaching loads. This will change the degree options for nursing students. DSU Nursing is developing a 2-year registered nurse pathway to accelerate the number of qualified graduates in this area. DSU is planning pathway options like 1-year licensed practical nurse certificate or diploma, a 2-year associate and registered nursing program, and a 4-year bachelor of science in nursing program. So we'll see what happens with this, but yeah, I thought I'd update you on that. And I'm not sure where they are in finding a new president. I know they had someone take over, but we will see. Okay, so this brings us back to some information just to keep you up to date on what's happening here. And back to Arizona, the governor vetoed a bill at stripping the power at the University of Arizona away from the faculty. So basically what's happening is that the faculty has the choice. And there was a push to give that power then to the president and the board of regents, who kind of caused some of this mess up that they have. So, yeah. So let's get into it. It says the bill was passed by the Republican-led legislature and would have given the authority to approve academic degrees or create new departments to the regents, who could only delegate it to a university president. While it would have applied to all three state universities, the bill sponsors, Republican Travis Grantham, made it clear he was motivated by the University of Arizona's ongoing financial crisis, a $177 million budget shortfall university leadership didn't announce until the fall of 2023. They now say that the shortfall has been reduced to $52 million. Grantham blamed that crisis, at least partially, on the fact that UA President Robert Robbins didn't have complete control, unlike someone like ASU President Michael Crow. Ellie Wolf, who's covered the UA financial trouble since the beginning, sat down with the show to talk about it. So this is an interview that they've done, and I don't have time to read the interview, but I'm going to bring this up with KJ, ZZ, and Phoenix. But I do want to point out that there is more in this ongoing saga. So please keep an eye on this, and if you want the show links to these different articles, I'll be happy to provide that as well. All right. Let's talk about this. This is something we kind of talked about before, but I really wanted to bring this up. This is from the New York Times, and this happened to come across my desk, and I was like, I have to talk about this because obviously I'm in this area. So it says how a leading chain of psychiatric hospitals traps patients, and this was shocking. It says Acadia Healthcare is one of America's largest chains of psychiatric hospitals. Since the pandemic exacerbated a national mental health crisis, the company's revenue has soared. Its stock prices have more than doubled. But a New York Times investigation found that some of that success was built on a disturbing practice. Acadia has lured patients into its facilities and held them against their will, even when detaining them was not medically necessary. In at least 12 of the 19 states where Acadia operates psychiatric hospitals, dozens of patients, employees, and police officers have alerted the authorities that the company was detaining people in ways that violated the law, according to records reviewed by the Times. In some cases, judges have intervened to force Acadia to release patients. Some patients arrived at emergency rooms seeking routine mental health care, only to find themselves sent to Acadia facilities and locked in. A social worker spent 6 days inside an Acadian hospital in Florida after she tried to get her bipolar medications adjusted. A woman who works at a children's hospital was held for 7 days after she showed up at an Acadian facility in Indiana looking for therapy. And after police officers raided an Acadia hospital in Georgia, 16 patients told investigators that they had been kept there with no excuses or valid reason, according to police report. Acadia held all of them under laws meant for people who pose an imminent threat to themselves or others, but none of the patients appear to have met the legal standard, according to the records and interviews. Most doctors agree that the people in the throes of a psychological crisis must sometimes be detained against their will to stabilize them and prevent harm. These can be tough calls, balancing patients' safety with their civil rights. And I agree, it's kind of tough sometimes. We never want to put somebody in the hospital involuntarily. But it ultimately comes down to if you're really going to be dangerous to yourself or to the public, we have a duty to do so, to keep you safe and to keep others safe. But it says, but at Acadia, patients were often held for financial reasons rather than medical ones, according to the more than 50 current and former executives and staff members. Acadia, which charges $2,200 a day for some patients, at times deploys an array of strategies to persuade insurers to cover longer stays. Acadia has exaggerated patient symptoms. It has tweaked medication dosages, then claimed patients needed to stay longer because of the adjustment, and it has argued that the patients are not well enough to leave because they did not finish a meal. Unless the patients or their families hire lawyers, Acadia often holds them until their insurance runs out. We were keeping people who didn't need to be there, said Lexi Reed, a psychiatric nurse who worked at an Acadia facility in Florida from 2021 to 2022. Every day spent in a psychiatric hospital can be a trial. At Acadia facilities around the country, health inspectors have found that some patients did not receive therapy, were unsupervised, or were denied access to vital medications. Many inspection reports describe essays, assaults, and filthy conditions. Tim Blair, an Acadia spokesman, would not comment on individual patients, citing privacy laws. He said the patient examples cited by the Times were not representative of many patients with positive experiences. Still, to be clear, any incident that falls out of our rigorous standards is unacceptable, and actions are taken to address it. He added, quality care and medical necessity drives every patient-related decision at Acadia. Acadia is at the forefront of a shift in how Americans receive mental health care. Psychiatric hospitals were once run by the government or nonprofit groups, but both have been retreating from psychiatric care. Today, for-profit companies are playing a bigger role, lured by the Affordable Care Act's requirement that insurers cover mental health. Acadia operates more than 50 psychiatric hospitals nationwide, and the bulk of its revenue comes from government insurance programs. More than 20 nonprofit health systems, including Henry Ford in Michigan and Geisinger in Pennsylvania, have teamed up with Acadia to open facilities. The success has attracted notice on Wall Street. With the stock price rising, Acadia is valued at about $7 billion. Its chief executive, Christopher H. Hunter, was paid more than $7 million last year. Since Mr. Hunter was appointed in 2022, Mr. Blair said the company has improved the quality of its care and the training of its employees, all to support enhanced patient safety. Federal and state authorities have periodically cracked down on Acadia, as well as its main rival, Universal Health Services. In 2020, UHS agreed to pay $122 million to settle a Justice Department investigation into whether the company billed for unnecessary inpatient stays. UHS denied wrongdoing. This year, Acadia said it had tentatively agreed to settle a similar Justice Department investigation into, among other things, whether patient stays were medically necessary. Acadia was founded in 2005 by Reeve B. Wald, a financier, and grew slowly at first, but in 2011 the company went public and embarked on a major expansion. The timing was ideal. Over the next several years, Acadia got a lift from Obamacare, which requires insurers to cover mental health. Today, Acadia has 54 inpatient psychiatric hospitals with a total of 5,900 beds. It fills those beds in a variety of ways. Acadia markets directly to potential customers, encouraging them to skip the ER. The company cultivates relationships with people like police officers and emergency responders in the hope that they will bring patients to Acadia. Professionals in these industries often do not have the deep expertise in behavioral health care, so developing these partnerships allows them to better serve the individual in need, Mr. Blair, the company spokesperson said. Acadia also pitches itself to staff in hospital emergency rooms that have been inundated with patients seeking mental health care. Business development teams make sales calls to the doctors and other hospital workers, passing out brochures and talking up to the expertise of Acadia staff and its willingness to take difficult patients. Sometimes they come bearing donuts. In a few states, Acadia has dispatched teams to overwhelmed ERs to help them determine whether patients need to be hospitalized. These employees, known as assessors, are supposed to be objective, but several said Acadia scolded them when they suggested that the patients be sent to other psychiatric hospitals. Valerie McGinnis, who worked as an assessor for Acadia until 2019, said there is a consistent pressure to send patients to Acadia facilities. We get emails and calls and texts berating us. It made me feel really gross because Acadia hospitals were not always the best one for patients. A colleague, Gwyneth Shanks, agreed, saying it felt deeply unethical. Ladisha Haynes, a former human resources director at Lakeview Behavioral Health Hospital, an Acadia facility in Georgia, said that when the hospital had empty beds, the assessors were always being pressured and told to beat the bushes. Their judgment was clouded. Mr. Blair, the Acadian spokesman, said that the use of assessors in the emergency room was a standardized industry practice. He said ER doctors, not assessors, were the ones who decided whether and where patients would be hospitalized. The Times also identified 8 instances of Acadians holding people who had voluntarily checked themselves in, but then changed their minds. One of those patients was the hospital worker in Indiana who asked for anonymity because she didn't want her health issues made public. She sought treatment at an Acadia hospital in Indianapolis, but then was held against her will when she asked to leave, according to a complaint filed with the state attorneys general. She was released after her father went to court. Another was a retired city employee who asked the Times to identify her by initials, TB. In March of 2021, she was feeling depressed and went to her doctor's office to get a therapist's recommendation. A nurse there provided her several options, including visiting Park Royal in Fort Myers, Florida, and Acadia Hospital near her home. She said an employee at Park Royal had told her that in order to get therapy, she would have to sign herself in. She arranged for her husband to pick her up that evening from the hospital. But when TB tried to leave, Park Royal refused. It let her out 6 days later after her husband went to court and a judge ordered her to be released. Once Acadia gets the patients in the door, it often tries to hold them until their insurance runs out. Acadia goes to great lengths to convince insurers that the patient should stay as long as possible, often around 5 days. To do that, Acadia needs to show that the patients are unstable and require ongoing intensive care. Former Acadia executives and staff in 10 states said employees were coached to use certain buzzwords like combative in patients' charts to make that case. In 2022, for example, state inspectors criticized an Acadia hospital in Reading, Pennsylvania, for having instructed workers to avoid adjectives like calm and compliant in a patient's chart. That same year, employees at Acadia hospitals in Ohio and Michigan complained to state regulators that doctors had handwritten false statements in patients' medical records to justify continuing their stays. This is a lot. This is a lot, and I just wanted to find out. And so now I'm curious, and I'm going to have to Google this. Um, Acadian Hospital, because I think I know which one it is, but I'm just curious. In Indiana. And interesting enough, that's not the one I thought it was going to be. But in case you're wondering which hospital that is, I'm going to say their name. It's Options, and they're owned by Acadia. And I had no idea. Now, I have had some patients that I've sent there, and they've done wonderful. So I'm not going to say it's always this case. But I'm just saying. I was curious to see who owned it, and now we know it's Options. So there's a lot more to this story. There is a lot. It's a long story. Please head on over and read this if you want more information. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on this. It's from the New York Times. Um, and I have to say, I know not all the staff is like that. I know not all the facilities are like that. I know that there are some people that do great work. I know this. And so for some of my patients, this is literally a lifesaver. Okay. So I don't want you to think that I'm not supporting them. I am. But if they're doing some bad things, we need to also bring that out as well. All right. So let's get into this next story because we are just running short of time and there's just so much news to cover today. So Stewart Hospital sale objectors include IRS and the Archdiocese of Boston. I told you I keep an eye on what's happening with Stewart Healthcare. It says that Stewart Healthcare prepares to make the case in federal court Wednesday that the deal it reached to sell 4 Massachusetts hospital facilities should be quickly approved. A number of others would like to have a word, including key lenders for the bankrupt company, the Archdiocese of Boston, and the Internal Revenue Service. The blur of activity includes ongoing negotiations between Stewart and Massachusetts state government over a second and larger infusion of public funding that the company says is required to keep hospitals here open until the sales close, possibly on September 30th. Massachusetts aided Stewart with $30 million to stay afloat in August and is now poised to provide the company another $42 million in payments and advances by the end of this week. So we'll keep you in the know of what's happening with Stewart Healthcare. Okay, so this is a story. This is a story that came up. And I was like particularly not happy about hearing about this. So it says mom unhooks child from medical equipment, shoves pregnant nurse at hospital, feds say. A Georgia woman whose child was receiving treatment at U.S. Army Hospital became abusive and attacked several nurses, including one who was pregnant, federal prosecutors said. Now she will serve prison time over the violent outburst at the Wynn Army Community Hospital at Fort Stewart on June 27th of 2022, according to prosecutors and court documents. The Army post is about a 40-mile drive southwest from Savannah. That day, after the woman brought her child to the hospital for treatment, she began demanding that medical staff perform certain procedures on her daughter that could have been more dangerous, weren't recommended, and weren't part of the standard of care, prosecutors said. The mother had no professional medical training, officials noted. This is another problem. I understand that we want to advocate for our families and want certain things, for our children, but this is not the way to get it. Okay? This is a way to go to jail. Do not be attacking people. So while staff continued to treat her daughter, the woman unhooked the child from hospital equipment and started to forcibly remove her from the facility. As staff members tried to stop her, she pushed a pregnant nurse and pushed another nurse into a wall. She was yelling at them and using profane language. Military police responded and ultimately took the child out of the woman's car, according to prosecutors, who said the girl was returned to the hospital for treatment. The woman, 35, of Liberty County, has been sentenced to 1 year and 4 months in prison after she was convicted of obstructing and hindering emergency professionals and misdemeanor counts of simple battery and disorderly conduct. Okay. Her defense attorney, Katie Brewington, didn't immediately respond to McClatchy News' request for comment on September 4th. Brewington plans to appeal the woman's sentence, according to a notice she filed on September 4th. McClatchy News is not identifying the woman to protect the identity of her child. Ahead of sentencing, Brewington wrote in court documents that her client, quote, overreacted in a time of panic and fear and believed that her daughter was in medical danger and not getting appropriate medical treatment. She said in a sentencing memorandum that a collateral consequence of her client's conviction was that she lost her job as a paralegal with Morgan & Morgan when a jury found her guilty in the case in April. So again, now she has a job or had a job in the legal profession, which I don't know if she'll be able to go back to for any time soon because of her bad behavior. And I think about the consequences. And there could have been a much different way that she could have handled this. Her attorney says the behavior she displayed in the hospital during this incident is not the behavior she is known for throughout her community. As a result of the altercation, the woman is banned from the facility. She must report to a Bureau of Prison Facility by September 23rd to begin serving her sentence. While family members and patients will occasionally disagree on standards of care in medical facilities, it's inexcusable to physically attack and disrupt the work of healthcare professionals. So, yeah, that. All right. There are, again, so many stories here, but I think we're going to end it with this last one. And this is our nurse making a difference because it's after our time. This is our nurse making a difference. And this is coming out of the Minden Press Herald. And this is Minden's Michael Dexter earned International Award for Emergency Nursing Education. And I thought this was great. Congratulations to him. It says Minden resident Michael Dexter has been awarded a prestigious Brandon Hall Group Excellence Award for his contributions to emergency nursing education. Dexter, who serves as the Director of Professional Development for the hospital, has worked in this area. His passion for excellent patient care, commitment to nurses' lifelong learning, and collaborative spirit have fueled tremendous innovation and success for BCEN Learn Continuing Education platform. To be recognized as a leader in learning and development among global companies and innovators is a tremendous honor and very humbling. Board certification in nursing is highest professional achievement and requires a great deal of study, preparation, and continuing education. We've worked hard to maintain standards for our offerings and provide relevant educational material for nurses seeking to earn and maintain a BCEN credential. So congratulations to Nurse Dexter and for his contribution in emergency nursing. That's going to end our news stories because there's like 6 more, but we don't have the time for that. But I will say this, keep up with what we're doing because we're going to have some exciting things happen in the next few months. I know I say that a lot, but I am serious because there's some things that are going to be happening in the next couple of days as I work to providing better programs for those of you that are in the Nurse Shark Academy or want to become a member of the Nurse Shark Academy. And what will that look like? And how will you be able to get access to the content and the training that we have so that you can be successful entrepreneurs. So be on the lookout for that. Follow us on our page. Don't forget to check us out on the NorthSharkAcademy.biz. And thank you for your time, and good night, and have a great evening.